We initially germinate seed in the north, the Burdekin and the central region because they have quite different growing conditions. Been a handful of examples where from a very early stage, from when we start collecting the ratoon data from the cats, the first ratoon data, you get a gut feeling this is going to be it. And we had that here in the north with SRA 26.
Everyone is always looking for that silver bullet. Why is it so difficult to produce a cane that ticks all the boxes?
Hello and welcome to the Cane Matters podcast, proudly brought to you by Sugar Research Australia. I'm your host Sonia Campbell, and today we are presenting the sequel of a two-part series looking at the complex world of breeding new varieties of cane for the Australian sugar industry. Joining me again today is SRA Northern Variety Development Manager, Dr. Felicity Atkin. Welcome, Felicity. Thank you very much, Sonia.
So in the first part of this series, we delved into the intricate crossing process to create new genotypes in the form of seed for planting and testing in our variety breeding program. Today, we're explaining the different trial phases of the selection process and how elite clones eventually progress through to commercial release. It's quite a complex journey, Felicity, but where does it all begin?
It is a complex journey, and that complex journey takes about at least 12 years, but it all starts with that seed that we produced through the cross-pollination program.
So what is the first stage of the trial phase?
So what we do is we select seed from the best crosses that we've produced. We actually germinate it. We germinate it by putting it into a climate-controlled germination chamber for 2 days. Once that seed is germinated, then it goes into the glass house and hardens for about 4 weeks before we pot out the little babies into trays and harden them on benches for at least another 3 months before they're transplanted into the field.
We start off with about 100,000 seedlings across all of the selection programs, and these are germinated in a number of different growing regions.
We initially germinate seed in the north, the Burdekin and the central region because they have quite different growing conditions. They have different rainfall, different irrigation needs. They have different disease pressures. So they start the basis of the initial selection populations for the north and the Herbert region with what's grown at Moringa, the Burdekin region with what's grown at Brandon, and the central, southern and New South Wales regions for what's grown in Mackay.
So what do you do with the seedlings once they're hardened?
So we transplant them out into the field in family plots in what we call our progeny assessment trials. So each seed will germinate and produce one unique individual. For each family, we could have anywhere from 100 to 300 to 500 unique individuals representing that one family. For us to take measurements on an individual seedling is both costly and unreliable. So instead of assessing each individual seedling, we assess each of the families. So they are planted into the field in family plots, represented by 20 individuals per family plot. In that family plot, we will measure yield, sugar content, fibre content. We will also make visual observations on any of those undesirable agronomic characteristics that no one wants in a commercial variety, whether it's suckering, lodging, side shooting, in some cases arrowing, and look for any leaf diseases or smut.
So from day one, they're put to the test.
They are. We are trying to cut down 100,000 individuals over 12 years to produce maybe 2 or 3 commercial varieties at the end of that 12-year pipeline. We have to be ruthless right from the start.
It really is survival of the fittest.
It's a marathon. From that plant crop data, we will select the top performing families. Then the first ratoon crop of the progeny assessment trials are used basically as a propagation source. We go back into those top performing families and we will visually select the best looking seedlings from within those top families. And we use a differential selection rate. We will take the most number of seedlings from the best performing families. But even though we're not taking any measurements in that first ratoon, we are still doing a visual assessment of the ratooning capability of that seedling, because sometimes there are some of our top performing families from the plant crop. We go back into them into the first ratoon and they are very poor ratooning. We will not take anything.
So they may have shown a lot of promise in the lab, but they simply can't hack it in the field.
They don't have the resilience to handle the harvesting conditions, and they're the ones we certainly don't want. So even though we don't collect any performance data in that first ratoon, we are still doing a visual observation, a visual selection for ratoonability.
So where to from there?
Once we select an individual from the seedling population, they're actually given a name. Before that, they're only known by their family. So it's like you being only known by your surname, and then it's not until you're selected to go through to the next selection stage that you're actually given your name, Sonia. They are then planted into our first clonal stage of the selection program. During that process, we select roughly 10% of the seedling population to progress through to the next selection stage. As I mentioned, we are pretty ruthless. We want to think of it as a negative selection process. We discard anything that has any major defects and carry through those that look like they have the best, the most promise.
How early on in the trial process can you get a sense that a variety is likely to be a winner?
That unfortunately will vary from clone to clone. Every breeder often has their favourites. You try not to.
Like a favourite child?
Exactly. Parents say they don't have favourites, but I think they really do.
For the record, I don't.
And often one of your favourites, it'll end up with a critical flaw, whether it's a susceptible disease rating or a ratooning issue. So you try not to pick your favourites, but there have been a handful of examples where from a very early stage, from when we start collecting the ratoon data from the cats, the first ratoon data, you get a gut feeling this is going to be it. And we had that example here in the north with SRA 26. Right from that cat stage, the appearance, the data, it just ticked all the boxes right from the start.
If only that happened more repeatedly. Anyway, we're digressing.
We are.
So we are at the clonal assessment trial phase.
The clonal assessment trials, it is the first clonal stage. So we go from one seedling to planting each of the clones out into a 10-metre plot, a single row by 10 metres. And again, we are assessing it for yield, sugar content, fibre content, and those visual observations. We take those trials out to first ratoon. It is the first stage where we are collecting actual yield data using commercial machinery at first ratoon. At the cat stage, we are assessing roughly 8,000 to 10,000 individuals across all of the selection programs. Based on that plant crop data, we will then select the top individuals. Those individuals are repropagated and sent for their very first formal disease screening for smut and pachymetra. Those same individuals, we collect the first ratoon data on those same individuals so that when we decide which individuals we progress through into the final assessment trials, we've got plant and first ratoon data, plus an initial smut rating and an initial pachymetra rating.
And I would imagine the ones that don't progress, they're discarded.
Not repropagated, never to be looked at again. They are discarded forever.
And in each of the trial phases, the crops are harvested with a commercial harvester, weighed, and samples of the cane are taken from each row.
All of our selection stages, we harvest with a commercial harvester. The data that we collect is using commercial machinery, which is stop-start every 10 metres to collect those weights. At the same time, we cut a subsample from each of those plots, whole stalk samples, and process them through our juice labs using our NIR machinery to measure sugar content. Very similar to how the mills use it. Actually, the calibrations are exactly the same.
And you're not only using the NIR, you're actually juicing the plant and testing the sugar content.
Yes. Everything gets processed through the NIR, but 1 in 10 samples, every 10th sample, we will then juice and put through the wet lab for a validation process and to refine the calibrations for the NIR, so we end up with more accurate information. Once we have selected our top performing cat clones and they've been screened for smut and pachymetra, we then make the decision of which of those get planted into our FATs. Because we are establishing our FATs on commercial cooperators farms that represent the main cane growing conditions for each of the regions, we want to make sure that each of those entries has as few defects as possible. That's why it's important that we get the smut and pachymetra rating beforehand.
And by FATs, you're talking about final assessment trials?
Yes.
So after years of rigorous testing and weeding out the weaker varieties, the FATs are the grand final for those elite clones who have managed to survive the selection process so far?
Yeah, from the 100,000 that we started off with, by the FAT stage, we're probably about 7 years into the 12-year variety pipeline. It's at this stage that the trialling becomes more intensive, both in the plot size that we run, so they're 4 rows by 10 metres, the amount of replication that we have, the number of locations that they're trialled at, plus also the disease screening. And then after a certain point, once they're identified as potential commercial contenders, we also start looking at milling qualities as well. Growers have to be able to grow a variety. The millers have to be able to mill it. So it's a very costly exercise, which is why we can only handle trialling roughly about 150 clones per region in this final assessment trial. There's usually about 10 years worth of variety development already completed by the time we look at getting a clone ready for possible commercial release. There's still trialling yet to be done, but we start that possible release process in the final 2 years of the selection process.
How many FAT trials are conducted?
We establish approximately 4 FATs in each of the cane growing regions, and each of those 4 FATs represent the major growing conditions that growers might experience. Like with the pats and the cats, we collect yield, sugar content, fibre content, and do visual observations in the plant crop. After the plant crop, we identify our kind of elite bunch. They are the ones that we exchange with each of the selection programs, and they get sent for further disease screening. It's at this FAT stage that we take them out to second return for the very first time. Prior to that, they've only been assessed as far as first return. One of the reasons why we only take them out to second return in the FATs is because previously there had been a lot of trial work done to assess what is the most efficient, optimal return length do we have to take our trials out to. And second return was the magic return number, where we stopped seeing re-ranking of clones in our trials. So everything looks good in plant crop. First return, we start to see separation in terms of the yield in a lot of the experimental clones and commercial varieties. Then in the second return, we see further re-ranking and separation, where we really start to see which of those clones are returning better than others. From second return onwards in those trials, in those experimental trials, we no longer saw any more re-ranking of the clones. So that's why we only take them out to second return. And there's always a trade-off. Ideally, in an ideal world, we would love to take them out to further returns. taking them out to third and fourth ratoon will almost double the number of trials we have to harvest every year. But we get the information that we need by second ratoon.
We discussed before about the fact that all of our breeding trials are conducted in different regions because of the commercial importance of different pests and disease pressures, as well as different climatic conditions. Is it important for each breeding team to share information on the results of each of their trials for each promising new variety?
Oh, definitely, definitely. So we have some commercial examples at the moment where a variety is grown very successfully across all of the cane growing regions. Q208 and Q240 are good examples of those. Then we also have some other commercial varieties which do not do well in all of the regions and are quite specific to the region that it was originally bred for. And that's why it's important that we do conduct those separate selection programs. And what we also do is, once we identify our elite clones from each of the selection programs, we actively exchange our germplasm between the programs as well. So at the moment, here in the north, we are trialling advanced clones from other programs being grown here under northern conditions while they're being assessed for commercial production in the other regions, so that when a commercial decision is made, we already have local data on those particular varieties. So once we have that second ratoon data and we have a range of other diseases like Fiji leaf gall and leaf scald on each of those experimental clones, plus also we have some initial millability data for fibre quality, we will identify anywhere from 3 to 6 experimental clones which look like they have real commercial capability. So 3 to 6 clones per region. They are the ones that we introduce to the RVCs for consideration for possible commercial release.
Who makes up the regional variety committees, or RVCs?
The committee is made up of grower and miller representatives because it's important to have input from both sectors of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
As mentioned earlier, grower has to be able to grow it, miller has to be able to mill it, actually, and the sugar has to be able to be marketed to the international market. All of that needs to be considered. So SRA packages the information, presents the information to the RVCs in a transparent way so that the RVCs can make the most informed decision about which clones will progress towards commercial release, which ones are discarded, and then the final release decision in most regions is a unanimous one. Everyone has to agree that it is the best commercial variety to be released for that region. One of the functions of the RVC as well is to review the approved planting list. Now, that approved planting list is very important because it is one way for the sugar industry to ensure that it is meeting the Queensland Government's biosecurity obligation by not putting disease pressure on your neighbours by growing a susceptible variety. So often those varieties that are discussed and approved on the planting list are included in the variety guide. And because each region has quite different or can have quite different approved lists, one way to communicate that is through having regional variety guides. Another reason why we have the regional variety guides is to provide the information that a grower needs to decide which variety best suits their on-farm conditions.
And as most would know, those variety guides are available on our SRA website. Now, Felicity, we've almost concluded the selection process journey, but I have one final question, and it's one that you're asked on a regular basis. Everyone is always looking for that silver bullet. Why is it so difficult to produce a cane that ticks all the boxes?
We do get asked quite regularly, and one of the challenges is because we are breeding for so many traits, we've got productivity traits for cane yield, sugar content. We have diseases. We have numerous diseases we have to breed for. We have returnability. There's always a trade-off. Not one commercial variety has been a silver bullet. A lot of growers remember the wonder variety like Q124, but they also don't remember, or they probably should remember, the fact that it was a slow germinator. You'd plant it, go away fishing, come back 8 weeks later, and it's still starting to poke its head out of the ground. I guess it's just like people. Everyone is different. Everyone has their likes and dislikes. There are some varieties which suit waterlogging conditions better than others. There are some that are more drought tolerant than others. But you will never find a variety that suits every condition that every grower throws at it.
That brings us to the end of today's episode. We've learnt so much about the incredible science and dedication that goes into our breeding program here at SRA, from the first delicate crosses to the commercial release of a new variety. I don't think anyone would argue that it's not a long and complex journey, but it is ultimately a journey driven by a simple rule: creating a sweeter future for all Australian cane growers and millers. Another big thank you, Felicity, for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
And to you, our listeners. If you'd like to learn more about SRA's breeding program, go to our website at sugarresearch.com.au or tune in to our next Cane Matters podcast.